Blood is a legendary first-person shooter that was developed by Monolith Productions and published by GT Interactive in the year 1997. It ran in Ken Silverman's build engine, which also powered games such as Duke Nukem 3D and Shadow Warrior. And while Duke Nukem 3D took heavy inspiration from 80s action movies and Shadow Warrior took inspiration from kung fu and gun fu flicks, Blood took its inspiration from horror movies such as Evil Dead, Army of Darkness, The Shining, Friday the 13th, so on and so forth. In Blood, you play as a gunslinger named Caleb, who was part of a cult that worshipped the dark god Chernobog. At the beginning of the game, we're not given explicit reason as to why this occurs, but the dark god Chernobog and the rest of the cult turn on Caleb and a few other cult members and betray them. And so after this occurs, Caleb rises from the dead, and then the whole premise of the game after this is Caleb taking revenge. So over the course of this game, Caleb, who is this wisecracking sort of anti-hero character, much like the other build engine games where the protagonist was very vocal, which was very different from the protagonists in games like Doom and Half-Life. Caleb traverses all sorts of, I guess you could say, spooky locales, such as a dark carnival, dark forest, a snowy hedge maze and hotel that's a reference to The Shining. And there are all sorts of cool environments that you go through in this game, and for a shooter from the 90s, I guess you could say much like the original Quake, Blood was definitely very atmospheric. You fight all sorts of enemies, which include zombies, spirits, giant spiders, cultists, which definitely make up the brunt of the enemies that you encounter. In addition to this, there are also hellhounds that you fight. There are gargoyles and all sorts of different enemies that all fit into the horror theme that the game goes for. And it pulls this off very well. But definitely the highlight of Blood's gameplay, in addition to the great level design, is just the combat. The feel of the weapons is great. The sawed-off double-barreled shotgun is extremely rapid-firing for a shotgun. Caleb loads it very quickly. And this is a lot of fun, especially up close. Each weapon has an alternate fire mode. In the case of the shotgun, if you left-click, it fires off one shell at once. But if you right-click, it fires off both barrels. And if you do this at close range against cultists or zombies, it is very devastating and very satisfying. But that's not where the satisfying combat ends, because in Blood there is a whole host of other weapons in your arsenal. The most boring being a pitchfork, which you typically just use to save ammo against zombies because they're by far the easiest to fight with just a pitchfork. But you've also got a Tommy gun, which can be fired precisely, or with the alt fire you kind of swing it around wildly if you're trying to stun lock multiple enemies. There's also a dynamite bundles that you throw out, and these can be very fun when you round up a big group of zombies into one cluster, toss out that dynamite bundle, and then just watch the gibs and blood just fly all over the place with a massive explosion at the epicenter, and it is glorious to behold. After that, you also have an aerosol can, which you use in conjunction with your lighter. This can light enemies on fire, as can the flare gun, which can either shoot out a single flare that takes a few seconds before an enemy catches fire, or with the alt fire, you can send out a barrage of flares that creates a massive fiery explosion. Speaking of massive fiery explosions, this game's rocket launcher is in fact a napalm launcher, which does exactly what it sounds like it would do. It shoots out a big ball of napalm that then explodes. It can one-shot gargoyles and a lot of the more bullet-spongy enemies in the game, so it is a very powerful weapon. The alt fire of this gun, which I often forget to use, sends out a even bigger explosion that sends out a huge area of effect with a ton of splash damage, and it is absolutely insane. And in addition to this, you've also got a Tesla gun, which is basically just like an electric version of, say, the plasma rifle from Doom. And this is also very powerful and very effective against all enemies in the game. And in addition to this, I had mentioned the dynamite bundles you can throw out. You can also throw out dynamite bundles that are proximity dynamite bundles, kind of like a proximity grenade, and that you can throw them out, and then if an enemy gets close to them, they explode. You can also use remote detonation dynamite bundles. So throw one of those out. You can figure out how that works. Just click the button when you're ready to blow them up. And then you also have a life leech, which is this staff with a skull on it. It shoots out fireballs, or at least streams of fire. So as you can tell from my descriptions of the arsenal in this game, there are a lot of fire weapons in Blood, which makes sense when you're dealing with demons and the undead, I suppose. And then also you have a voodoo doll, which is very effective against the large gray gargoyles, because with these guys, it's kind of cheesing them a little bit, but you can crouch and just circle strafe around them. Just hit them with the voodoo doll. See the animation of Caleb stabbing the voodoo doll as it's doing damage to them. Very effective against this enemy in the game. And it's important to note that if you are not damaging an enemy while you're using the voodoo doll, you actually start to damage yourself. So you definitely have to be a little cautious while using this weapon. Definitely a wide arsenal of weapons, a very creative arsenal of weapons, and most importantly, a very fun, very satisfying arsenal of weapons. In addition to this, you also have med kits that you can store in an inventory and use whenever you need them. But the other way that Caleb regains life is by eating the hearts of his fallen enemies. So this is how you keep your health up in Blood, but there are also armor pickups, as you would expect in a shooter like this. And there are also power-ups such as an invisibility cloak, and my favorite, which is the Guns Akimbo power-up, which can be absolutely insane. The game takes place over 4 episodes, most of which are around 8 levels each, with some secret levels thrown in there as well. So it is definitely a fairly long campaign, as a lot of boomer shooters from the 90s were. They're pretty substantial, and Blood is no exception. But like I said before, this game has great level design, great weapons, fun enemies to fight. The cultists are hit scanners, and if you are not ducking behind cover, constantly moving around, and taking them out as quickly as possible, these guys will absolutely melt you. The cultists in brown robes have shotguns, the same sawed-off double barrel that you have, and the cultists in darker grayish-black robes use Tommy guns, and both of these guys will, like I said, absolutely melt you if you're not careful. But luckily, Caleb moves very quickly, and this is another high point in Blood's gameplay, is how quickly you move as Caleb. Not just running across the ground on a flat plane, but he can jump extremely high, and the movement feels very bouncy and fluid and quick and responsive and floaty, but in a good way. It somehow feels floaty and tight and responsive at the same time, which is something that I don't think any other game that I've played has really replicated. Blood probably has some of my favorite movement feel in any boomer shooter. And with all of these things combined together, the level design, the movement, the gunplay, the enemy variety, the weapon variety, the atmosphere, the pop culture references.
Hey, she-bitch, let's go.
You bring all that together, and it definitely puts it into my top 10 for favorite games of all time. Definitely one of my favorite boomer shooters of all time. Blood is a classic. It is an amazing game, and I highly recommend it. So if you've gotten into these newer boomer shooters that have been coming out recently, and you haven't played a whole lot of the old ones yet, or you just haven't played Blood yet, especially this time of year, in October, the spooky season, I would definitely give Blood a try. Even though there are countless games coming out right now, it's still good to go back and play the games that inspired these new boomer shooters. So anyway, go play Blood, and you won't regret it. Alright, thank you for watching the video, and you have a good day. Alright, bye.